Welcome back. Thank you very much. My name is Apollo Longo, and I'm here with Tasha Williamson, Art Fusco, and the Wildcat. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today with the MA'AT Quorum, our 6th episode, which is domestic violence and sexual assault. I would like to hand the microphone over to Mrs. Tasha Williamson so she can give you some direct information on what's going on.
So, yes, we're talking about law enforcement officers and sexual misconduct as well as domestic violence. And I just wanted to touch on the fact that we currently have a sheriff deputy, Richard Fisher, who is being charged. And everything that we're talking about today is allegedly because, you know, we still have, you know, court cases going on. In some cases, it's not allegedly because those things have finished and they've been sentenced. But Richard Fisher was a sheriff deputy with the San Diego County Sheriff who has 14 charges of sexual misconduct allegations, 8 of those felonies, 6 misdemeanors from 14 women that he had interactions with that caused great trauma and damage to those women. And in this case, it's very difficult because there was a woman who came forward almost over a year, close to 2 years ago, filed a complaint, and it did not move forward. And so the issue is that they knew and had a formal complaint that was going to, you know, get him off the streets, so to speak, because she said he touched me, he did these things, and those are things that they definitely need to look at. They did not look at it, and so he was allowed to patrol for about 15 more months and maybe a little bit longer before there were other women who came forward, and then finally, of course, he was turned himself in and was charged with these counts. So that case is going on right now. This was under the current sheriff, William Gore, and so this was a very egregious type of miscarriage of justice, which caused more women than there should have been to be, you know, damaged sexually by an officer who had power to serve and protect. We also have, you know, prior to all of this, from years, there have been about 9 cases that SDPD, that has really haunted SDPD law enforcement. And currently what I was looking at is that on SDPD's website, San Diego, .gov, you can go to SDPD, and on their website they have a thing you can click on called misconduct related discipline matrix. But in that matrix there is absolutely no misconduct type for sexual misconduct. So there's nothing that will show us what happens when an officer has allegations against him or her of sexual misconduct, sexual battery, sexual harassment. There's absolutely nothing that shows us. And there was a Jane Doe case quite a while ago that had the biggest payouts and was supposed to have the massive changes to happen within SDPD and law enforcement. And apparently, you know, that's not a misconduct that we need to know what happens.
With that,
Jane Doe was a few years ago, and she was. It apparently says she was, you know, sexually harassed, or it was sexual misconduct, and she was so fearful that she was Jane Doe.
I have a question. What defines sexual harassment? I guess.
So we could talk about that because Carl Hersham, who was an SDPD officer in the sexual crimes unit, I believe, had racy posters. Posters of women that were, you know, the city felt like it was grossly inappropriate posters that he hung on his desk area.
That was in the sex crimes lab.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is workplace harassment?
Yeah, and it was considered sexual harassment. So language, pictures, you know, those are things that would be condoning of sexual harassment. So unfortunately, in today's time, it does cause men to be very fearful to say anything. And I've heard that. But also, I just would hope that men and women, you know, because women have sexually harassed as well. So I don't want to just say that it's an all man thing. It's predominantly men who do it, but there are women that have had sexual harassment cases as well. Just none that we know of in law enforcement currently. And so I think that, you know, we need to be sure that there's justice that's served. And I personally, because I have had that happen to me in retaliation, I believe women. But I know that there are possibly some women out there that have not done justice and have caused a lot of damage and made it
wolf is what you're talking about?
Exactly, and that's been a hard case when they come back. You know, you look at the woman from LA who lied about another young man who raped her, and he did time, and then come to find out he did not rape her. She had got a payout. He had served almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
He was going to be an NFL player. He wound up going back. So these type of women are not the women that do justice to the women who are actually victims. And so those are the type of women. I don't want anyone to lose their freedom, lose their job, or anything like that for allegations that are not real.
Usually money is the motive behind that most of the time, though, right? When there's money involved.
So they were both teenagers at that time, and I think that her thing was that she was afraid of her mother.
Okay.
And so she cried rape instead of just saying, hey, I had an affair or whatever with this teenage boy. And so I think that there was a little bit more, but it wasn't until they were adults and he was still incarcerated that she apologized. And so getting back to the SDPD, we were talking about earlier Christopher Hayes and Carl Hirschman and the Racy Posters. Well, they settled for $75,000 with those two women. The city settled with $75,000. So we know that.
So who exactly sued in the workplace for that?
So those were women, and they didn't name them, but there were two police officer women who sued because of it was considered sexual harassment in the way he talked and the pictures that he had up, and no one within that department seemed to think anything of it until this was brought to light. Christopher Hayes, I know we just talked about him, and he resigned after his complaints came out of groping and illegally detaining women on duty. And so then we have Anthony Arevos, who was doing sexual bribes, and those were on
to get out of citations.
Yeah, to get out of citations. And then we also have Gilbert Lorenzo, who had the domestic violence twice within 2 weeks.
Right.
And at that time, I believe Shelley Zimmerman came out and did a press conference, and she stripped him of all his police powers and pay.
Right.
And so we have Donald Moncrief, who was touching women. He arrested, and he was suspended without pay, and it doesn't really tell us how far it went. So departments, you know, from the standpoint of the victims, especially the ones who work internally with the department, so other officers or staff, when it came to hearing their information within the media outlets, they really felt that departments covered up officer misconduct, especially when it was male officers. And I believe that one of the most prominent cases was Dana Hoover, who was in the homicide division, and she filed sexual harassment and retaliation, and she felt that the department seriously did not protect her, and that the harassment that she filed, the sexual harassment she filed, she then was retaliated against. And so, but these are things that really happen. These are things that cause a lot of trauma and damage. But my main focus with all of this is that the way victims are treated and the way suspects are treated determines how women will come forward when it happens again. And we need courageous women to be able to tell their story, to be able to make changes, so that when our daughters and our sons get into any field, that there will be things in place to prevent this continual trauma and retaliatory acts that happen, especially with women who speak up and are not protected.
Definitely, that was very, very powerful, Tasha. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Next we'll go to